Welcome to Reconnecting with Wholeness, the podcast where we dive deep into the messy, beautiful journey of coming home to yourself. I'm your host, Paige, and together we'll gently question everything, bringing you deeper into self-awareness, acceptance, and trust. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Welcome. Today in this episode, we are going to be talking about decisions. And in order to do that, I am going to introduce to you all a tool that I really like for a lot of different reasons. So that tool is human design. So if you are familiar with it, that's great. If not, I will give you a little bit of the rundown, and I will kind of link it in a little bit later as to how that applies to decisions. It'll be pretty obvious though. So human design, for anybody who hasn't heard of it, it was designed in 1987 by a gentleman by the name of Robert Allen Krakauer. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name. He published it under the name Ra-Uru-Hu. Again, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly either. But basically, he had this really mystical experience, had this download. It combines astrology with the I Ching, along with the Kabbalah and the Hindu chakra systems. So there's a lot of information in human design. Some people maybe are familiar with the gene keys. That also kind of is related. I prefer human design as opposed to other tools because it offers things like what are easy bite-size nuggets to utilize in practical daily life, as well as it offers this depth of what you can go into. I am by no means a human design expert, so I do also have some notes for today, but we will kind of get into a little bit of overview and then really come into the authority. The authority is, according to human design, what you should utilize to make decisions. So that's kind of going to be part of the juice of today. But if you have not ever had a human design chart done for you, you can get it free. I'm gonna link a website that you can go to, Jovian Archive, to get a free report. You are going to need to enter your date of birth and time of birth to get it. And what you'll see is you'll see a body graph, and then you'll see chart properties. And for the purpose of today, we're looking at chart properties. You'll have a type, a nut self theme, and an inner authority. That inner authority, again, is really that decision maker. I just feel like it's not fair to talk about inner authority without also giving somewhat of a background of human design and the type and the nut self theme. So human design basically categorizes everybody as one of 5 types. That type will have the same not self theme. They also have signatures. I'm going to talk about those today too, because this has been something that I've started to lean into to help make decisions as well. And then your inner authority, which is kind of that decision maker, so to speak, at least according to human design. Now, what you might find is that you don't currently make decisions this way. If that's the case for you, my invitation would be to try it, see what happens. Try it with something small, try it with dinner. And if you already are making decisions in this way, then great. If you wanted, you could still try one of the other authorities that we're going to talk about today, but certainly not required. So types that you're going to see: manifester. Manifester is typically here to initiate and inform. One of the ways, I'll talk about that after actually. Signature is peace, and their not self theme is anger. So the idea behind the not self theme is you can tell when you're living out of alignment with yourself because you are having that as a response. So for manifestors, if you're angry, then that shows somewhere in your life you're not living in alignment, and what you're looking for is peace. So where I was saying I've been leaning into my signature, one of the questions that I would bring if you're trying to make a decision, right, is like, what brings you the most peace? Second type is generator. Our signature, that's what I am. Our signature is satisfaction, and our not self theme is frustration. So again, that like not self theme pops up when you're living out of alignment in some way. When I first was introduced to human design, it took me a while to like really figure out that there was a signature and like lean into that. So what I've started doing though is like, what brings me the most satisfaction? If I only like got one thing done today, what brings me the most satisfaction, right? And I use that as a gauge to make my decisions. Manifesting generator, these are a blend of manifestors and generator. Generators, including manifesting generators, make up the majority of the population. Their signature is satisfaction and peace. Their not self-theme is frustration and anger. They have both manifestor and generator tendencies, so their signature not self-theme reflects that. Projector, their signature is success, so what they're looking for is some sort of sense of accomplishment in guiding others. Their not self-theme is bitterness, so again, if you're a projector and you're feeling bitter, it just tells you that there's something a little off. That not self-theme is really kind of like a check engine light. And then reflector is the final type. Their signature is surprise, and their not self-theme is disappointment. So all generators, all reflectors are going to fall under the same signature and not self-theme. And that is type specific and less individual specific. Whereas our inner authority really is individual specific. One of the ways that I had heard at one point human design, kind of like an analogy for the different types, is a manifestor is like the composer, like Mozart or Beethoven. The generator is like the orchestra. The projector would be like the director who's up at the front telling everybody when to chime in, and the reflector is the audience. So if you are trying to figure out kind of what that actually means as far as a type, and maybe another day we can go a little more into the human design types, but today I want to try to stay on par for decision making. So there's a few types of authorities. I also have with me here a handy dandy, like how much of the population has what. So first authority we're going to talk about is emotional authority. This applies to 50% of people. It's most common. I have a lot of people in my life who have an emotional authority. And if you have an emotional authority and you're like, I'm not that emotional, I believe you. But the idea behind it is that you have emotional waves and clarity comes over time. So you really want to wait until making big decisions. Now, this doesn't mean that you are outwardly an emotional person. What this can look like a lot of times, especially with the men that I see, and I don't mean that to be like a sexist thing or like stereotyping, but I do see it a lot with men, which is they will say like, I'm gonna think on it, right? And emotional authority, like they're the I'm gonna sleep on this people, and they should. the thing to keep in mind if you have an emotional authority, and this is just what I've heard before, is that emotional authority people are never going to be 100% sure about their decision. At most, you're probably going to be at like an 80%. And part of that is just, even when you're feeling confident, you still have that like undercurrent of fear. And so like an 80% sure is sure enough. Yeah, with that, I mean, that's the main thing for emotional authorities. Sacral authority is 35%. This is exclusive to generators and manifesting generators. That's not incredibly important, but it is somewhat important to know. Only generators and manifesting generators can have this type of inner authority. And this is a body response, clear yes or no. The response is instant. Typically it's said that it's felt in the lower belly. That can be true. Sometimes it's just like a full body response. I have a sacral authority, right? So for me, when I learned about human design and my sacral authority, I was like, oh, this is good, because I do feel like I'm, honestly, the word that I would have used before was impulsive. I just kind of make a decision on the spot, and human design really gave me that permission to do that. So this is very like trust your gut. Also important for sacral authority is we don't necessarily do great with open-ended questions. We can, but sometimes close-ended questions are better. So it's like, do you want Chinese food for dinner? And what's that like body response? Rather than what do you want for dinner? And this can be helpful if you understand that like your partner has a different authority than you do. You can kind of use various questions. Both my daughter and my husband are emotional authorities, and sometimes I work well with it and sometimes I don't, right? So sometimes with my daughter, I'll be like, what do you want to watch for TV? And she doesn't say anything. And she's like, And so then I like start throwing out suggestions. And I don't mean to, but it's one of those, like, I can tell. I've tried to like, I don't know, I don't want to say stop back, but like when I do it and when I catch myself in it, it's like, okay, Paige, just stop for a second, like let her go through her wave, but to try to help her out, because that's what I need when I'm like helping myself out, right? It's like, okay, do I want this? Yes or no? Do I want this? Yes or no? Do I want this? Yes or no? So that's a little bit about sacral authority. Also, just because 85% of the population has either emotional authority or sacral authority, keep in mind too, if you are in a situation where you're like me, where your partner has a different response, there may be, I don't know if I like fully want to say frustration, but for whoever has that like sacral authority, that like in the moment, okay, this is what like we're gonna do, you really just have to be patient and allow the other person time. Next up, we have splenic authority, which is very similar to sacral authority. It's just a little bit different. So splenic authority is really based in like fears and intuition. So it is like sacral in the sense that it speaks in the moment. It's often pretty subtle and can be overridden fairly quickly. It also doesn't repeat itself. So splenic authority, like it's really about like that tuning in the initial moment. This applies to about 11% of people. It's typically seen in projectors or manifestors. And yeah, what I would say is if you find that you're a splenic authority and you typically wait to make decisions, I would just invite you to like really tune in. The same thing with sacral. And I know even for me, like when I originally was trying to connect in, this is where I'm going to get a little woo for people sometimes maybe. But I really was like, okay, body, show me what a sacral yes feels like, sounds like, looks like. Show me what a no feels like, sounds like, looks like. So really just allowing your body to kind of guide the way. Splenic is typically seen as like an intuitive knowing. So just also like however that presents for you, just allowing that knowing to be something that like you anchor into. Okay, we have ego authority. This is like 1% to 2% of people. We're going to talk about it. Similarly to splenic, it's found in manifestors and projectors, and you are making a decision based on willpower and desire ultimately. It's not about logic. It's about what feels aligned with your self-worth. So the question you're really asking here is like, what do I want? I don't know anybody with an ego authority. Number 5, we have self-projected authority. This is 2% of people. This is exclusive to projectors. And you're gaining clarity by speaking and listening to how your words feel. So this self-projected is really somebody who needs to talk it out. And as you talk, your truth will be revealed in that. Number 6, mental authority. You're going to gain clarity by inviting the right environments and receiving input. You're not making emotional decisions, but reflecting logically over time. So it's kind of the exact opposite of that ego authority, like what do you want? This is also 1% to 2% of people, only for, and it's only for projectors. So in case you're questioning why some types are exclusive, like why some authorities are exclusive to some types, part of that comes into when you actually like see your body graph in human design, you will see that there are 9 different like little squares or triangles. I've done like I've used multiple sites, and so they all kind of like look a little different, but you'll see like these little shapes, and those will either be white or they will be colored. And if they're colored, then you're defined in that area. And if they're white, then you're classified as like open or undefined. It's really just basically about how you process energy. We all have the same centers, but it is part of that category of if you have a defined sacral, for example, then it puts you into a manifesting generator or generator type. My husband and I both were generators, but he has a defined emotional center where I do not, and so that like emotional center basically like overrides the sacral, and at least that's my like loosey-goosey understanding. Again, I am not an expert here. And then last authority we have, this is unique to reflectors. It's less than like 1% of the population, and that's a lunar authority. Their decision making, if you're a reflector out there, your decision making is connected to moon cycles. It is requiring patience, big decisions. You need to wait a whole 28 days, follow the moon. You'll experience different perspectives throughout the month, and clarity comes by observing that. So I kind of equate this to an emotional authority, but on a much larger scale. If you are not lunar authority, you probably should not be making decisions 28 days out. And the reason why I say that is because oftentimes what happens with all of our other authorities is that the longer we go, kind of the more muddied it gets, right? So if you're an emotional authority person and you sleep on it, that's great, right? Maybe like trust whatever it is after 24 or 48 hours. But as you begin to like really overanalyze or overthink about it, then you're like, yeah, but, and like those kind of waves, it's almost like those waves come back again, and you just end up in this, like, for lack of better terminology, the way that I see it is like a drifting ocean, right? It's just like you've like thought about it and now you're back in a wave, and then you like kind of came out from that and came up on shore, and then a wave came and crashed over you again. And maybe who's an emotional authority doesn't necessarily feel that way, but that's the way it perceives to me from the people who I know who have emotional authority. And so really being able to just like make that decision, and I don't want to say like stick with it, because I mean, of course you're welcome to change your mind at any point. As I said earlier, I mean, I'm a sacral authority, and I will get a clear yes or no, and then sometimes I continue to think about it and I like talk myself out of it, and then I have to talk myself back into it, or I have to remember to like return to whatever my original answer was. So I think that using these authorities as just kind of a guidance can be beneficial, because I think that in so many ways we are taught and told in society to make a decision on the spot, and yet the truth is that is not actually what's best for the majority of people. For the majority of people, it is best to feel it out, to sleep on it, to figure out what they want, to talk about it, right? And yet we've kind of like designed this world for rush decisions, right? And so if you are on the other end of this, listening to this, and you feel like you get rushed into decisions, allow this to kind of be that permission slip that says like, nope, I'm going to take my time. I am going to sleep on it. I am going to give myself some time. The other thing that I will say is, for those of us who are splenic or sacral, where you kind of have that like instinctive decision, if you find yourself saying, I have to sit with this a little bit longer, that is a no. And more than that, for me, a lot of times what happens when I say that, if I'm like, I have to like sit with this, it's a no, but it's also like I'm trying to figure out what I do want. So it's like, if we use the dinner analogy, right? If we use the dinner analogy and I said, okay, well, like, what do I want for dinner tonight? And I offer, a bunch of things. Salad, Chinese food, pizza, whatever, right? And none of those feel good. If none of those give me a yes, then it's like, meh, I have to like sit with this, which really means like I have to keep thinking. It's really more of a brainstorming that I have to do, as opposed to like, let me revisit these, right? Whereas somebody who has maybe like an emotional authority, it's going to maybe be more of a revisiting. Also, I will say, as somebody who, I have a whole lot of emotional authority people in my life, it's taught me a lot of patience. But what I will say too is like really understanding that somebody with an emotional authority is not only not going to want to make a decision on the spot, but they're also, in my opinion, like my husband does this to me all the time. I love him, but he'll be like, well, like, we'll figure that out when we get there. We'll see. We'll see how we're feeling tomorrow. You know, like, tomorrow I'll see what I feel like. And my husband is very logical and he's not emotional, and I don't know if he's going to listen to this podcast episode, but he will say stuff like that, and he'll be like, you know, like, well, we'll see tomorrow what we're feeling like, you know. And my sacral authority wants a decision on the spot, right? I'm like, no, like, I want you to tell me right now. So, I go into this and on this tangent for a couple of different reasons, right? One is for those of us who have, I don't know that I would just want to say different authorities, because there are 7 different, right? But if you have a different authority to somebody close to you, right? Understand that they're on their timetable, right? So give them peace, patience, space, whatever, to make the decision for themselves. Because oftentimes we want people to make a decision in the way that we make decisions, whether we mean to or not, right? And so I can be, especially in my personal life and my like work life, it's a little different, but in my personal life I can be very much like, okay, just like make a decision. It's not that hard, when the reality is it is harder for them. They, like, my daughter does not have a sacral authority. She has an emotional authority, and so she has to think about it. She has to like feel about it, and she has to like see what it is that she wants to do. And I'm like, okay, are we ready yet? And again, like it's taught me a lot of patience. Some of you might already do this. I have a friend who she makes me chuckle, but she's been on her spiritual path for a long time, and she's an emotional authority, and you know, every time I'm like, make sure that you like sleep on it, and like figure out what you want to do, and she's like, oh yeah, I already do, don't worry. So you may have found that this is something you've been doing unconsciously all along, or you're already living in accordance to it. Now, I'm not saying that human design is the end all be all. I'm not saying that the inner authority is like the thing for you. It might not be. What I do want you to consider is, how do you make decisions now? Do you feel good about them? What's like a pain point for you when it comes to decisions? And if you are a person who is going to figure out what your inner authority according to human design is, are you open to trying something different, right? Now, by all means, if you're a person who you find out that you have an emotional authority and you've already been making the decision that way and you want to make it a different way, like try it. I don't know, see what happens. Again, start small. Okay, don't like quit your job on a whim. Be like, okay, I'm just gonna like pick something for dinner and I'm gonna make like an immediate decision and like see how that goes and how that felt, and if it, and honestly, like if it brings you, you're not self-theme, if it brings you anger or frustration or bitterness, or I don't remember what some of the other ones were, disappointment, then like there's your answer. Now I don't know for specifically when you talk about lunar authorities, I don't know what to tell you guys. I can't imagine. I can't imagine waiting 28 days to make a big decision, but at the same time, I can't. But also know that that's like big decisions. So, live your life, I guess. However, with the small decisions, and if you wanted to play around with the small decisions, you're welcome to do that, right? Test out what it looks like to have a small decision and sleep on it, or to talk about it, or to feel it out, or to go based off of what you want. That's the other thing that I really want to like leave you guys with, is even more than your authority, because I know in my heart, I know that there are going to be people who listen to this who are like, Paige, this is great, but I'm never going to click on this link and input my information. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to know what my inner authority is because I'm not going to do that step. So if that's you, I want to leave you with the kind of phrases, and then you can make that decision for yourself. You can use your discernment. You can take all of these. I fully believe that we all have the knowing within us, right? So even if you never like look at your human design, you will intuitively figure out whatever the best thing is for you, right? So if I could like summarize it, you have sleep on it, trust your gut, trust the whisper, what do I want, talk it out, feel it out, and follow the moon. And honestly, maybe this is going to sound like really weird advice, but even if you do know your own human design, like try out the others. Like what happens when you sleep on it? What happens when you trust your gut? What happens when you trust the whisper? What happens when you look at what do you want? What happens when you talk it out, right? Like you can take all of these things and apply them in small lives. That's not what I meant. Small moments of life, right? We can take this and we can say, okay, right? Like interestingly enough, when we have our life, right? When we have our moments, our small moments of the day, what do you want for dinner? Usually I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. Right? When do we naturally say, okay, like this is something that I need to talk out? When do we, like I will say, I have to feel it out. But that feel it out, this is so interesting. Okay, now I've gone down a whole different rabbit hole. This is so interesting to me. So the mental authority is about gaining clarity by being in the right environments and receiving input. You're reflecting logically over time. phrase is feel it out. This phrase, by the way, is brought to you by ChatGPT. I don't use it for all of my content, but I do use it for beautiful things like this. So my point is I will say this, like I'll say, I have to feel it out. And really what I mean by that is I have to receive more input, think about things logically over time, take that input and see if my sacral responds to it. Maybe I've lost you in that, but the reason why I think that's important is because I think internally we use these phrases recognizing, maybe like not consciously, but unconsciously recognizing that these all have truths, right? And so I might say I have to sleep on it, but when I say I have to sleep on it, it's like I've been overthinking a situation. I ignored that sacral response. I need to get clear. Sleep allows me to do that. And then in the morning, I'll come back and revisit it. If I'm asking, what do I want? Which I have been doing lately, right? It's an ego authority. Ego gets a really bad rap, but it's really like a heart-based authority, right? So decisions are based on heart desires. It's not about logic. It's about pursuing what feels aligned with you, right? So if I'm asking myself, what do I want? I will say, okay, maybe I want 3 different things, right? And then I'll use my sacral authority to say, okay, but what brings me the most satisfaction in this moment? So there's a lot of ways that we can layer this. There's a lot of ways that we can benefit from asking a question that aligns with maybe a different authority than what human design tells us our authority is. And at the same time, I trust that you will inherently know what is best for you, what is most conducive for you. So, practical thing moving forward. Connect back in to how you best make decisions. And whether that is looking at a human design chart or thinking about these questions, right? Thinking about these responses of sleep on it, trust your gut, trust the whisper, what do I want, talk it out, feel it out, follow the moon. If it's leaning into those, just see things kind of, I don't know that I want to say through this filter, but just, I invite you to see what else is here. And to try something maybe a little differently than what you've always done. We, I think, are really conditioned to try to make decisions on the spot. And that is not what is best for the majority of people. So take your time. And if you want, like I said, try out all of these and see how they feel. Try them all on and go from there. Thank you for joining me today. And if I leave you with nothing else, I hope that you are able to take some sort of insight from this to at the very least recognize that other people that we interact with are making decisions in different ways. And at the very basis, just give space and patience for that, especially for those of us like me with a sacral authority who want everybody else to also just have a sacral authority. No, but in all honesty, it's taught me a lot of patience, and for all of those who don't have either a sacral or splenic authority, do not allow other people to rush you in your decision making. Allow it to be whatever is best for you, whatever your decision is. Thanks for joining me today on Reconnecting with Wholeness. I invite you to take what resonated and explore how it shows up in your own life. Keep in mind, even the smallest shifts can spark transformation. If today's episode felt valuable for you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share it, leave a review, or connect with me on social media. Until next time, keep exploring, keep feeling, and keep reconnecting with the wholeness that's already within you. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.